All right, family. I want to welcome you to the Do Work Podcast. The Do Work Podcast is a weekly live where we discuss really everything comes back to one thing and one thing only. That nothing changes unless you do, and nothing changes unless you do the work. And tonight is no different. But first, let me tell you, tonight's episode is sponsored by Hard Work No Excuses Apparel. If you haven't, make sure to get your No Excuses merch at hardworknoexcusesapparel.com. All right, fam, let's get into it. So, with so much going on, I thought it'd be a great time to discuss expectations and rules of engagement. So, you may be wondering, like, well, Diva, what are rules of engagement? And if you don't know, I'll give you a very simple version of this. Rules of engagement are simply this. These are just general rules that are understood by society as a whole. We all agree either it's written law or it's understood or verbal communication, societal norms. We agree that these are the ways we are going to operate. This is the way society is going to function moving forward. So recently, the rules of engagement have been tested, right? So just to give you an example, everybody's been talking about Will Smith at the Oscars. And, I genuinely feel, I'll tell you this, I feel he did what he felt he needed to do. Whether we think it's right or wrong, but the reason most of us think it's wrong is because it goes against the rules of engagement, which are if you're in a professional setting or you're on TV and you're at an award show, rules of engagement say this is not the place to confront or physically assault someone. So by Will Smith going against the rules of engagement, everybody's shocked. Now, again, I don't necessarily think he was wrong. I feel he did what he felt he needed to do. And this is what's interesting about rules of engagement. If at any point someone decides to step outside of the boundaries, or as I like to say, go off script, it like discombobulates everybody. So Will smacking Chris Rock discombobulated everybody for the rest of the night. For the rest of the night. Society has a tendency to not know how to behave or what to do when the rules of engagement shift or change. So the general message I'm delivering tonight is just going to be this. Expect the unexpected and know there's only one rule in life. There are no rules. I know. I'm getting philosophical, but just hear me out. There's only one rule. There are no rules. So I want to give you another example of when the rules of engagement have been shifted and upset the balance. Let's talk about Putin, right? Your views on the war are irrelevant. I'm going to be honest. I don't care. I don't care about your views on the war. Do I think it's wrong? Yes. He attacked a country that was not as big, not as strong. He wasn't supposed to. It was against the rules. But what did he do? He broke the understood rules of engagement and said, I'm going to attack them anyway. And what did it do? It upset the balance. Everybody got all worked up. Nobody knows what to do. Now Ukraine is standing their ground. Shout out to Ukraine. Because Ukraine, you're a real one. Ukraine is a real one. For sure. They're like straight G's. The president is a G. He didn't leave. I mad respect for Ukraine. But again, the rules of engagement were tested. They were tested. So now you're like, okay, everybody's a little uneasy. Countries are uneasy because now it's like, well, who should get involved? How should we respond? There has to be a response. America decided to put sanctions in place, right? these sanctions go in place, people have to respond because the sanctions don't only affect Russia. Stopping stuff out of Russia affects the supply chain around the world. So who's being affected? It's a chain reaction. So whenever people step out of the norm, the societal rules that we put in place to maintain law and order, normally a level of chaos ensues. Hence, I don't think Will Smith has been talked about this much since the incident with his wife in the entanglement, right? And this is not about me getting into celebrity news, but I want you to understand something. When we step outside the norms, it disrupts everything. Now, to go back to Will Smith and take it a step further, the thing that really triggered and shifted everything was that Will's the nice guy. Will's the nice guy. Well, nice guys don't do that. If it was anybody else, maybe a little more thug, had a rougher persona, we may not have felt that way. Still, people would have been like, dang, he couldn't wait till after the show or in the back or at the after party. But the nice guy went off script, upset the balance, shook up the world. Every time something like that happens, we must remember in life to expect the unexpected. We can't expect people to always respond the way we think they should. We all know it's wrong for Russia to be invading Ukraine. We know it's wrong. But just because we wouldn't do it doesn't mean they don't feel they shouldn't. Hence, they are. When the rules of engagement are tested, chaos ensues. I mean, let's even take it. I'll even go. Let's get stupid simple, as I like to say sometimes. Let's get stupid simple. We have rules for driving. What happens usually when people run red lights? Accidents, most times, or not. Something happens, potential accidents, almost accidents. Somebody might get killed. Why? Because somebody is going against the rules and guidelines that as a society we have set up with our expectations. Now, when we go to talk about unspoken rules, it gets a little more complicated. So just to give you perspective on unspoken rules, presidents are supposed to conduct themselves a certain way, right? They are. Now, there's not necessarily a handbook that says what they can or can't do in terms of behavior. But there is a certain air they should have, which we as a country and as other countries would call being presidential. So when Trump got in office, what did he do? He went off script. He went against what we know as being the norm. He was not presidential. If he didn't want to talk, he didn't talk. If he didn't want to engage in the meeting, he didn't do it. If he didn't want to read a briefing, he didn't. Now, somebody say, oh my God, Diva, that's awful. He was irresponsible. I don't care about your political views on Trump. I'm talking about his behavior. And what he did was he went off script and he did what he wanted to do. He went against the societal norm. He did not go into our normal rules of engagement. He did not do what we expected a president to do. Right or wrong, what did I tell you earlier? You have to learn to expect the unexpected. You have to learn that your rules may not be the same rules that others have. And that's where it gets tricky. I'll give you another example. Rules of engagement. Our soldiers, American soldiers, we do not necessarily believe in, and I'm not over there, so I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but generally speaking, We do not believe in attacking civilians at all. If we're going in a military battle, we want the military. We don't do civilians. So let's talk about rules of engagement. 9/11. What happened on 9/11? I'll tell you what happened on 9/11. What happened on 9/11 was simply this. The other country decided they were going to change the rules of engagement. They didn't just attack our military. They attacked our civilians. They attacked our infrastructure. That day changed our lives for so many reasons, but what it also did is it changed the rules of engagement, how we interact with our enemies. Think about it. Comedians right now are sitting there like, man, if I tell a joke, it's possible I could get punched. Now, let's be honest. Hasn't it always been a possibility? It's always been a possibility. For somebody to get punched, it's always been a possibility. But now we know it's a reality. Does this mean comedians are going to be more cautious with their jokes because the rules of engagement have changed? Because comedians are used to doing what they do. They tell jokes. They will roast you, especially if you sit in the front row. I've been to comedy shows probably twice in my life, and I never sit in the front row. I'm like, you are not getting me. I can take a joke for the most part, but then sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I'm a little sensitive. So I know if I'm going to go to a comedy show, I got to sit towards the back. I don't want that smoke, right? But the rules of engagement simply say that it's important. If you hear noise, I'm in my brick and mortar tonight, and they're making so much noise out there. I'm usually film late. But the rules of engagement simply say it's an understanding between parties. And when one party breaks that rule, again, shakes the world. Shakes the world. So let's get into expectations. So what does this mean? What should we expect moving forward? Expect the unexpected. That's what you should expect. Expect the unexpected. Because there's no way for us to really know how things are going to shift and go once the rules of engagement are broken. Once they are broken, there is nothing. Once they're broken, there's nothing that can really shake you back and make you be like, okay, what's normal now? Your normal changes. Your normal changes. And once your normal changes, your perspective changes. So it's super important that you get used to expecting the unexpected. And yes, I'm using examples. I'm using life examples. I'm talking about celebrity stuff. And I'm going to be honest, I honestly could care less. I did make a video about it, but it was more to address that he did what he felt he needed to do. And when it comes to rules of engagement and it comes to expectations, we cannot put our expectations on other people. And when it comes to rules of engagement, again, we cannot expect them to follow the rules that we follow. I know we want to, but we cannot expect that. So I'll give you another example where we talk about the rules of engagement have changed. They have shifted. So I keep notes in my phone sometimes. I don't want to forget because I got like 20 topics for you guys, but we'll get as many as we can. The other thing that happens with rules of engagement, let's talk about churches. There was a point where churches and schools were safe spaces. They are not safe spaces anymore. How many school shootings have we had? How many churches have been shot up? We are not safe spaces anymore. We are not safe spaces. So knowing that, the rules of engagement have changed. Once where you felt like you could go in church and be cool, now you gotta go in church and look over your shoulder. You do. We expect the unexpected. We have to expect the unexpected. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be complacent. And every time somebody challenges our norms, it really shakes up and upsets the world. Now, whether you agree with how Will Smith handled his situation, whether you agree with what Putin is doing or not, whether you agree with how Trump ran his presidency, his energy, his aura, is irrelevant. I want you to really start to pay attention and watch the rules of engagement. I want you to watch these unspoken laws and guidelines, and even some of the written ones that dictate how we move, operate, and interact with each other. And as you watch that, as you really start to watch that, you will understand that there's only one rule. And what is the one rule? There are no rules. There are none. There are no rules. There are no rules. So you're probably thinking, well, Diva, so what does this mean? What does this mean? Like, how? I feel uneasy now. I don't know what to expect. I can't control things. Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. We never could. We never could. But what you can do, which is super important, if you're setting yourself up to expect the unexpected, the goal is just to be prepared for anything. The goal is to have ways to keep your emotions and energy in check when the unexpected occurs, when the rules of engagement shift. I'll give you another example. So during COVID, I had a situation with my landlord. Everybody knows I own a brick and mortar gym, where I was like, look, it's COVID. I'm going to still pay my rent. I just have to pay it around this time. The landlord says, okay, Diva, we'll work with you. They did. We do this all through COVID, right? Still on that schedule coming out of COVID. We get a new landlord, and I did the same thing, and they were like, we're not accepting it like that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? This is what I've been doing. This is the way I've been paying. But this is the thing. The new landlord has nothing to do with my arrangement with the old landlord. They don't have to respect the previous rules of engagement. I expected them to, but they don't have to. New rules, new playing field. So I had to make adjustments. It's not, man, I'm telling you, life and business have so much in common. They have so much in common. And expecting the unexpected, learning that the number one rule is there are no rules, keeps you prepared and able to float. It keeps you prepared and able to float. You learn to adjust, move, and be agile. You learn to really be in the moment, do what's needed. You learn to absorb energy, move, throw it back. You learn not to get weighted down by situations. You're constantly thinking, figuring, and moving. So you're probably like, well, Diva, I feel sad now. Don't feel sad. Don't feel defeated. Remember, now that you know and understand what you're up against, you're up against the unknown. And being up against that is hard. It's challenging. But that's life. That's business. And every time something shifts, it's just a reminder that the rules have changed. It's 2022, post-pandemic, sort of, but the rules have changed. We went through a whole 18 months where how we interacted as a world, as a society, changed. It changed. So now that we're coming out of that, There's still some things. Let's be honest. Talking about changing rules of engagement, COVID tests are all the time now. When they first came out, we were all like, oh my God, COVID tests. Now we take them all the time to pretty much do anything or go anywhere, whether you got the jab or not. The rules have changed. How we fly. Allegedly, we're getting rid of masks. I don't know if we are, but the rules have changed. How we engage changes. How we communicate with each other changed during the pandemic. Virtual communication and conversations became norm. Why? The rules of engagement changed. The workplace changed. So if you put yourself in the mindset of things are always changing and I just need to be ready to move with it, believe it or not, you'll be less stressed. And this is the truth. Nobody likes change. Nobody likes change. I am so resistant to certain change, it's unreal. I can deal with 50 million things, but like if you move my toothpaste from one side to the other, I'm like, I'm losing my shit. I am. It's funny, but it's true. We got to expect the unexpected. We need to be ready to absorb change. And we need to know that the rules of engagement are simply this. There are no rules. People will do what they want to do. We should not expect anything less. That's in business. That's in life. That's in relationships. People always do what they want to do. One of my favorite quotes that a friend taught me, he told me years ago, and I feel like I'm always saying it, but it's that people do what they want to do, and they don't do what they don't want to do. I'll tell you one more time. People do what they want to do, and they don't do what they don't want to do. So once you put that on the table, you understand that the rules of engagement can change anytime. You understand that it's best not to have expectations because then you can't be let down. You just interact, assign, and people fall in line and in place accordingly. Their actions show you where they fit in your world, in your personal life and in your business. Now, no expectations does not mean you go through life like, oh, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. No, you still give orders. You still have things you want, but you're not so defeated if it doesn't play out the way you imagine. You hire that new employee. You expect them to be a rock star and they come in and they're absolute trash. You're like, oh, that didn't work out. But if you had high expectations for them, you're like distraught. Or you get into that new relationship. You're like, this is the one. He's great. He's amazing. Or she's great. She's amazing. Or they, whatever. You get into this relationship and you have so many expectations and then it doesn't work out. And what happens? People crumble and fall apart. Gary Vee said in a video just last week, which kind of helped trigger this conversation for me. He said, yo, stop having expectations. He said, just stop. And some people took it like, oh, why would you say that? But I have to agree with him. Stop having expectations. Don't. You put the work out there. People will do it. They won't. People will respect boundaries. They won't. And they'll fall in line. And then you'll know where you stand with them. When the rules of engagement change, you know where you stand. You know where you stand. You do. I love everybody's like, oh, diva, but Will Smith, he must have had a mental breakdown. I don't even think it was that deep. My man was like, I'm tired of people talking about me and my wife. This is the dude who's going to get it today. And Chris was the dude here, and Chris was like, all right, I didn't know that was a sensitive topic. But that can happen anytime, in any situation. The rules of engagement can shift. The person you want to joke and play with might not be joking and playing with you. They just might not. I don't know. But that whole situation for me just really brought me back to more people were upset that like, oh, how can he hit another person? I don't condone violence. And let's be honest. Everybody condones violence. Diva, why would you say that? I'm going to tell you why. We all condone violence when we think it's necessary for us. When you think it's necessary for you, you condone violence. Yeah, you do. Now, most of us don't think that was necessarily a situation that warranted mild violence. Really, if you're going to say that, I don't even think it was that whatever, but mild violence, right? But there are times where violence might be necessary. I don't think that was it necessarily, but for him it was. So, what are we taking away from this podcast? This is what we're taking away today. 1, what's the number 1 rule of engagement? Number 1 rule, there are no rules. Remember that. At any given moment, there are no rules. Number 2, don't put expectations on people. Hand them the work. Put out what you need from them or what you want. Either they're going to do it or they're not. They fall in line. You know where they stand in your process, in your life or in your business. Number 3, don't put what you would have done on other people. Don't say, oh, I wouldn't have hit. I will overreacted. There are plenty of times where I think we've all felt like, oh my God, people overreacted. Look, we don't know where people are in their head. We don't know the 20 things that happened prior to that. When I was talking to Dr. Christina a few weeks ago, we were talking about Karens, and I was like, yo, sometimes when these Karens are tripping out, it's like they're having this meltdown and they usually flip out over things that you think are trivial, but I don't know what happened before their day. Don't mean they right. But when you see these reactions, they come from someplace. They come from someplace. Even in a situation with Russia, Putin has made it very clear he wants to bring it back to the USSR. That is his driving force right now. The rest of the Europe don't want to do that over there. They don't want no parts of that. But that's what he wants. That's his driving force. That's what's pushing his actions right now. So when the rules of engagement change, remember to stay alert, stay sharp, stay focused, because we can't control those things. We can't. Expect the unexpected. The number 1 rule in life and business is there are no rules. I've heard so many stories about companies where maybe the CEO will walk in a boardroom and say, fire everybody. That's not protocol. That's not normal rules of engagement, but he did it. It happened. Shakes up the whole thing. Are rules made to be broken? Yeah, sometimes. Because sometimes change happens through that. Positive change. Maybe there are some rules or structures in place that don't work well. Or really not benefiting society. Or maybe it's hindering the growth. So yeah, do we challenge those? Oh yeah. But what I don't want you to be is comfortable. What I don't want you to be is complacent. We all get caught off guard sometimes, but how you respond and bounce back That's what's going to make the difference. Yeah. All right. That's it for tonight. So, guys, again, if you haven't, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. Go to divarichards.com. Okay, that's real important. Subscribe to the I'm messing it up. Subscribe to the newsletter. divarichards.com. And also make sure to go over hardworknoexcusesapparel.com. Get yourself a camo no excuses hat. Why? Because that's important, because nobody cares about your excuses, but that's a whole nother podcast and conversation. No expectations, guys. Only rule of engagement is there are no rules. All right, family. Remember, nothing changes unless you do. Nothing changes unless you do the work. Let's go.